Welcome to the Daddyhood Rocks podcast with John Wolford and Brandon Miller. We are here to encourage you, empower you, and strengthen you so you can engage, level up, and have fun being a dad. We are going to have guests, deep conversations, hilarious stories, and insights that will give you the strength you need so you can be the dad you gotta be. And now, here are your hosts, John Wolford and Brandon Miller.
Welcome to another episode of the Daddyhood Rocks podcast. We are so excited to be here to help dads to engage, level up, and have fun being dads. What a great episode we have in store for you. A lot of fun, a lot of variety today, which is really pretty exciting. And you don't want to miss our conversation with Brandon Hall. Before we jump into that, one thing that also provides a lot of great variety is the Adventure Challenge. We've talked about this every episode for the most part. You don't want to miss this, especially here in the cold part of the winter heading into spring. If you're getting cabin fever, you want to find stuff to do either with your family, with your friends, your significant other, or even just yourself. Look no further than theadventurechallenge.com. They have these challenge books that you use like a scratch off lottery ticket, scratch off a challenge. You do the challenge, you take a picture of the mess you've made or the whatever it is you've put together, and you write a little memento as far as, hey, this is the memory that we've made. Absolutely a bonding experience, no matter who it is you're doing it with. What a great way to engage and to level up and to have fun. If you want some good laughs, do the Adventure Challenge. And so when you go to theadventurechallenge.com, look through all that they have to offer. And when you're ready to check out, do the promo code Daddyhood, all caps, and you'll get 10% off. And it's just a great way to help you have things to add to your arsenal, your toolkit as a dad. And we are convinced that you will not be disappointed if you go the route of theadventurechallenge.com.
Yeah, I love the Adventure Challenge. I'm excited about this opportunity still. It's been, 4 or 5 weeks now, and I am still absolutely stoked about it. So thank you. Brandon 1. Tonight we have on Brandon 2, Brandon Hall from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Wow, just full of knowledge, so much depth that a lot of people don't even think of. But one thing I want to say is Brandon Hall is a fellow podcaster. He has the podcast called The Brewed Life, loves coffee. I love coffee. But I want to give him a shout out. I think you should go check him out. He talks about some of the deep, dark subjects that people hide behind or hide from, actually. And so go check him out, give him a listen. But man, we have just a phenomenal interview with him tonight, talking about personalities and daddyhood, daddyhood with personalities, trying to father different personalities. And I mean, just so much. It's a well-rounded interview that I don't think you want to miss. So puberty. We have puberty that we talk about. It's like I said, very, very well-rounded. So, you're not going to want to miss what's coming up literally right now. So without further ado, here is Mr. Brandon Hall.
Welcome to another episode of the Daddyhood Rocks podcast. This is Brandon, and this is John, and this is Brandon. We have Brandon Hall with us today. We are so excited to have you with us. You are a fellow podcaster. You are an Enneagram mogul. I might be exaggerating there, but we are so excited to have you on here because you are a thinker, an observer, and you also are a contributor to the podcast world. So thanks for being here. Brandon, would you introduce yourself and your family to our listeners?
Sure. So my name is Brandon, and I am married to my wife, Nicole. We've been married for, it'll be 17 years this year. We have 4 kids. My oldest is almost 15, and then we have a 12-year-old, a 5-year-old, and an almost 4-year-old. So we run the gamut there. We're going through potty training and puberty at the same time. And so we live in Northeast Indiana in Fort Wayne. And I've been here for 20 years in Fort Wayne, moved here when I went to college, but I grew up in a little town called Mentone outside of Warsaw, Indiana. So that's pretty much it.
All right. And you're a fellow podcaster. We've talked about that. And we're all about the podcast life here. Tell us about the Brewed Life. What's the story behind it? What it means to you? Tell us about your baby.
Yeah, sure. So podcasting was something that I wanted to do for a long time. But I think that for me, and I think a lot of us get into this space where we want to do something, but we don't want to do it until we think it's perfect or we have all the right equipment or the right things all lined up. So I put it off for a long time. And then one day I just you know what, I'm just going to do it. And I found Anchor, which is a podcast distributor and tool. And I had my phone and I had my headphones and I was like, I'm just going to do it. And if people listen to it, great. If they don't listen to it, that's fine. And so the concept behind it is I'm an avid coffee drinker. I love coffee. I love having conversations with people over coffee. Obviously can't do that a whole lot right now in person anyway, but I enjoy it. And that's one of my favorite things. And so I wanted to try to create the atmosphere at a podcast platform where I'm just having conversations with people, and whether it's something, lighthearted or everyday, about being a dad or whatever, or, I've even had conversations with people about, what it's like to be a person of color in an all-white church, and, just having sometimes controversial conversations, but being able to have those conversations with people. And, there's a lot of people who, the podcasting world is huge. There's hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and we can get caught up thinking that, and for me, speaking personally, I can get caught up thinking that, what else do I have to add that isn't already out there? But what I've come to realize and have learned is that even though I may be repeating same conversations that other people have had, there may be somebody out there that needs to hear it in a way that I say it. And so, what I say in the conversations I'm having and the voice that I'm using is important, even if it's repeating something that's already out there.
Yeah, I think we're all about, here at Daddyhood Rocks at least, we're all about those tough conversations because, especially in the world of being a dad, you just can't get around them. We've talked about things from how we describe our genitalia with our kids. People don't talk about that nearly enough, and it needs to be talked about. And so I can really respect that you're talking about, being a person of color in an all-white church. That's something that nobody talks about, or few people talk about, but it's so, so dearly important. So I appreciate that. You've got this podcast, you're growing. What do kind of your hopes and dreams look like for the podcast? What's the ultimate goal?
That's a great question. I don't know if I have an ultimate goal. I think my goal right now is just to continually improve what I'm doing and continue to make quality content. And I think right now I kind of do different seasons, and I did a season on the church and different subjects. I did a season on authentic manhood. I did a season on the Enneagram, and right now I'm doing a season over overcoming obstacles. But I think what I want to do, and this is something else I'm passionate about too, and have become passionate about, is racial justice in our country. And so I have privilege as a white male, but sometimes they're like, well, how can I use that privilege? And so instead of getting caught up on being this advocate that goes to rallies and speaks out and has a large voice, part of the privilege I have is I'm a white male. People listen to my voice. I have this podcast. So how can I bring on people who may not always have the same opportunities or have the same avenues for people to listen to them. And so I think right now my goal is, and what I'm focused on is bringing in more women and more people of color and bringing them onto the podcast and hearing their stories and listening to their voices and giving them a platform through the privilege that I have, so that people can hear their stories and hear what they have to say.
Well, that's great. And I think it's foolish of us as men to think we have the corner market on wisdom and knowledge and everything else. And so it was really exciting. We launched here on New Year's. So we're still very early on in our infancy stages, but it's going well. We just had our first interview with a non-dad this last week, a friend of my family's, and she had some fantastic advice for dads. She's a single mom of 5 kids, and she has bought a lot of foster kids, non-bio kids, and she has great perspective. And I think it's really it's to our detriment if we don't listen to that advice. It's to our detriment that we don't listen to those other voices that have been not amplified in the past. So that's awesome that you use your platform and your privilege to be a megaphone. I think that's great. So thank you for doing that, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you are an Enneagram fan of that typing system as far as personality goes. So tell us how you got hooked and why Enneagram matters to you.
So this is something I could talk about forever because I love but I don't remember the exact, like the first time I heard about it. I feel like I heard about it several years ago, and at that time there wasn't a lot of stuff out there unless you got Father Richard Rohr is considered a large voice in the Enneagram, in the modern Enneagram community. He kind of started popularizing it a little bit more in the 70s, 80s. But he has a book, and I remember getting that book, and it was like, this is so much to read. I'm not going to do it. And so, but at some point I was like, I decided I'm going to dig into this. I took a test, which if you are watching this and I don't recommend tests necessarily. They're a good starting point, but they can be subjective to where you are, like in health or stress, depending on when you take the test. But they're a good starting point. So my biggest recommendation is always reading through all the types, and usually whichever one kind of like makes you feel like you got punched in the gut, or somebody is like reading your diary, that's probably what your type is. But I think I took a test at some point, but I remember reading about the type 9, and I was like, oh, that's totally me. Like they're reading my thoughts, or they're reading my diary. And so that's how I got into it. And I really just love the Enneagram because there's a lot of personality tests out there that you can take. So there's Myers-Briggs, there's Strength Finders, DISC assessment, and they're all good in their own right, and they can all help you learn more about yourself. But those are more how you present yourself to the world and how people see you, whereas the Enneagram digs more into the why behind you present yourself that way to the world. And that's why I enjoy it. It's been beneficial for learning about me, being able to see where, when I'm going into unhealthy areas and stress, and kind of like getting myself back into a healthier area. It's been really good for communication in my marriage and understanding each other better. My wife is a type 1. So there's a lot of dynamic there with somebody who doesn't want to cause conflict and somebody who wants to like follow the rules exactly. So I really enjoy it, and like I highly recommend it because the Enneagram helps us understand each other better. And when it causes empathy, we have empathy for each other, and then empathy causes us to have compassion, and then compassion causes us to have community. And that's what I feel the Enneagram does. And, when you first meet somebody, like you have like all these superficial conversations, like, where do you work? Tell me about, what do you like? What sports teams do you like? Not those are bad things, but like it's just superficial stuff, and you like slowly over time build this relationship. But when everybody kind of knows what their Enneagram type is and understands the Enneagram, then it's easy to kind of like push past a lot of that superficial stuff and like, okay, I understand you, understand how you communicate, I understand your motivations behind what you do, and so it helps us to have a better relationship quicker than if we didn't understand each other on that level.
I love it. Now, specifically in regard to your role as a dad, how has Enneagram impacted your role in daddyhood as far as being able to connect with your 4 kids?
That's a great question, and that's something that I'm like discovering all the time. So back to my type, I'm a type 9, which for those who don't know the Enneagram, I'm the peacemaker. So I don't like conflict. I avoid conflict at all costs. I'm constantly trying to maintain peace internally and externally at the same time. So that like there's this constant struggle because the reality is we can't always have peace internally and externally at the same time, but that's what I want. And as a parent, that's also difficult because, like I said, we have an extremely strong, 3 of our 4 kids are very strong-willed, but we have a very strong-willed 4-year-old who is potty training, and we have a strong-willed almost 15-year-old who's going through puberty and like testing boundaries. And so it's hard to find peace sometimes. So, but as an Enneagram 9, I'm also can be the mediator. And I also always see both sides of the situation. Like, even if I have a very strong opinion on something, it's still easy for me to understand where everybody's coming from. And so that is helpful. And also it's taught me to, digging into the Enneagram again, I'm in the anger triad. So anger is my my go-to. Now, usually I suppress anger. That's what 9s do. We push it down. And so that's something I have to be aware of as a parent too, because my home is my safe place, and my kids are in that safe place. It's easy for that anger to come out with my kids. It's easy for it to, especially as a 9, if I'm pushing it down, like sometimes it doesn't take much for that cap to pop off and the anger to come out. So just being aware of anger, finding ways to work through anger without it being my kids that I work my anger out on, and also just being able to understand, like just finding ways to understand where they're coming from, even if I don't like what they're doing, I don't like what they're saying, I don't like their attitudes or whatever. But like, okay, instead of getting angry about this, like, even if I have a strong opinion about this, let's take a step back and, okay, why do you feel this way? Where are you coming from? And as parents, like understanding that a lot of times we expect our kids to act like adults and they're not adults. Yeah. And, but finding ways through that peaceful mediation to help them to understand things or express their feelings, or just be that comforting place for them to be able to go to find that peace that they're looking for.
Yeah, that's really good. I think one thing that stood out to me there was realizing that our kids aren't adults and treating them like adults. I do that. So you don't know this about me. I have 6 kids. 2 of them are step, and I have a 10-year-old stepdaughter that I didn't experience this 10-year-old age. And so I skipped from having a 5-year-old, 6-year-old to 10-year-old when she walked into my life. And so it was like, okay, why aren't you doing this? Where's your common sense? What the heck is going on? So I really like that you mentioned that, because it's so important as dads to just take a step back and say, okay, you don't get this yet, but you're going to have to. Right. So, with that said, what's one way that you kind of hit on it, I think, a little bit, but what's one way you'd like to grow as a dad?
Yeah, I think it's just being. I want to be that place that they can come to and like talk about anything. I didn't have that, growing up, and I didn't have. I had safe places, but it was not necessarily at home, and I want them to be able to come to me and to my wife and be able to talk to us or share openly with us whatever they're dealing with and struggling with, and without fear of judgment, without fear of being punished for whatever. And so, not that we always do a good job, but we always try to express that and be like, whether it's something big or small, just like if you have a question about something or if you're struggling with something, like know that you can come to us. And because we'd rather that you come to us and talk to us about it and that we can work through it together than for it to be ignored and turn into something bigger that is going to cause, conflict or going to cause bigger consequences in our lives.
So far, with that said, with your oldest who's going through puberty, how's that going?
It's going. It's good. It's like puberty gets a bad rap. I think it's hard, and I remember being a teenager and going through because I think we make a big deal about body changes and stuff like that, but really in the scope of things, like that's the most like minuscule thing of puberty. Like puberty is like dealing with all the emotions and dealing with like our hormones are changing and our thinking processes are changing and questioning things. Like there's so much like emotionally and mentally that happens in puberty that gets ignored, that I think is so much more, has a bigger impact on our life in the long term than, growing a mustache, like it's, and so that part has been working through it. So going back to the Enneagram, I'm not saying go out and type your children, but sometimes you can understand a little bit where your kids are coming from, especially as they get older. So our son, presents to us as a type 6. And he questions everything, and his brain always goes to the worst case scenario. And he's always, prepared for everything that could possibly go wrong. Yeah. and so, mix that with puberty. And so it's been a process. And so another thing that some 6s do is that they test their boundaries, like they test authority. And so that's I think probably the biggest thing that we're dealing with right now as he's getting older and growing this, like he's testing his boundaries and testing our authority and testing like how far can I push, and so that causes a lot of conflict. But as far as everything else goes, we try to be open and try to allow him to be able to talk to us about things. Again, this was something that wasn't talked about in our house growing up. And so, I learned everything through health class in high school. And
awkward.
Yeah. And so one of the things that we did for him is there was a children's book that was, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but it was a children's book my wife had growing up. And it was really good because it went through like body changes, how babies are born, that kind of stuff. And it had like one version that you could read to little kids, like a picture book. And then it had another part that was like more descriptive. So that as kids got older, you could go through it. And then we also got him a book, probably like when he was in, I want to say like 3rd or 4th grade, maybe it was before 5th grade. And it was the boy's body book. And so like it was a descriptive about like everything that's going to change. And so we just gave it to him and said, we're not going to sit down. We're not going to read through this with you or whatever. But this will answer a lot of questions. And if you're reading through this and you have any questions about anything you read, come to us and we're willing to talk to you about it. And unfortunately, he's been more willing to talk to my wife about these things, unfortunately for her. But it's been good. Like, I think that just being open about that, giving them opportunities to have conversations, but not making it weird and not making it such like a huge big deal, but just making like everybody does this, everybody goes through this. It's only for a season, and you'll get through this, and we're here to help you along the way if you need it.
That's great. Now, switching gears. So for you, I mean, you have a lot of material to sift through for stories. What's at least one of your proudest daddyhood moments?
There's a lot. I'm having a hard time like thinking of a specific moment, but I think that for me, it's been the times when our kids are away from us, like whether they're at school or hanging out at a friend's house, and like being able to see them make good decisions or put others before themselves without us having to be there to like tell them to do that. Because one, it tells us that, okay, they're going to be good human beings. And two, like it is like, okay, even though like 90% of the days we feel like we're screwing everything up and are sending our kids to therapy, they are learning, they are growing, they're making the right decisions. Like, just seeing them care for their friends or care for their, there's an age gap between our first two and our second two, but, watching them, the older two, take care of their sisters and without being provoked or without, forcing them to do something, and just seeing those little moments of just maturity and growing and like getting little hints of like who they are going to be as they go into adulthood.
Yeah, two things I've noticed. Number one, I'm a type 6 and you're really calling me out this episode. Number two, I really like whenever we ask dads, what are you most proud of? Inevitably they say, I can't put my finger on one thing, and that just means so much as a dad, because that means you've got all these things that you can choose from. But most of the time they go, I'm really proud of how they handled this, or I'm really proud of how they do away from us, because that means that we're doing something right. And it does. I have my 7-year-old Johnny. He is just insane, but he's also incredibly intelligent, both educationally and emotionally. And I love hearing from his teachers because they speak to that. And so for me as a dad, that just makes me feel so good. Hey, we're doing something right. My ex and I separately are doing things right. And that makes me feel good. So I had to speak to that. But we're going to change gears a little bit. Here at Daddyhood Rocks, we are all about the gross and embarrassing. So if you could give me an embarrassing moment as a dad, what would it be?
I was thinking about this, and I have a hard time like choosing or not choosing. Like I have a hard time thinking of anything because I know that there's been embarrassing moments, and maybe like the 9 in me just like blocks all those out because they were uncomfortable. I know there's been moments where like one of my kids have asked something extremely inappropriate in a very public place or whatever. But the one thing I think of that we go back to the story all the time because I was talking to my wife. I was like, what's an embarrassing moment? And so she brought this one up, and it's true. So it was with my oldest, and he was probably a year and a half old, and we were by ourselves while my wife was at work, and we went to Target, and he's in the back of the cart at Target. And I think I was looking at sunglasses or something. And next thing I know, he literally just falls out of the back of the cart on his head and at Target. And I'm like, oh, are you? And he was fine. And he's obviously still fine because he's made it to almost 15. But that's the one thing I can think of is like, being in a public place and my child falling out of the back of the shopping cart on his head on the floor. And, because you're like, oh man, I hope people don't think that I'm like a horrible parent because my children are falling out of carts. But yeah,
that's good. That's good. I don't see that one often. Most of the time, you see embarrassing, and it's like, oh, my kid blurted out this word or something like that. That's a new one. The shopping cart. I like that. I'm gonna tuck that away because I've got almost 1-year-olds and I'm expecting something similar. So
yep.
So new dads just starting out, even dads who are beginning to foster or adopt or stepdad or whatever, what advice do you have for them as they're entering this brand new role?
That's a good question. And I think that, I can look back almost 15 years ago when we had our first. And I think that new dads, we kind of get into this headspace of, I don't know what to do, or I'm not, like, how much value do I have right now? Because, they're newborns, and, especially if your wife is nursing, like, what do you do? Like, I can change a diaper or two during the day. I can, get what she needs, but, when he wakes up in the middle of the night, I can't feed him. And so, I think we get in the headspace of, like, what value do I have? And I say, so my first thing would be, like, don't get caught up in that, because it feels like you don't have a lot of value or you don't have a lot of contribute, but you being there and supportive of your wife, and just being present and doing what you can is of value. And I guess my other thing is, don't get caught up in putting expectations of who your child should be based on what you think they should be. And by that, I mean, like, if you have a son, don't, like, he's going to play baseball or he's going to play basketball. He's going to be the star. He's going to go to this college, and we're going to spend all this time playing sports together and watching sports. And then you find out maybe he's like me and hates all sports and has no desire to be athletic or watch sports. And then you've put these preconceived ideas, and now you've lost this connection. And instead of learning and being involved in something that he loves and being part of that and learning about that, you've created this division between the two of you based on these expectations that you put him before you even knew who he or she was. And so just learning to like love what your kids love, and get excited about what they get excited about, even if it doesn't make sense to you, even if it irritates the life out of you. Like, my kids, my oldest still is almost 15, and he still loves to play Minecraft. I don't get Minecraft at all. And I've tried it, and I end up, like, digging myself into a hole, or, I don't get it, but their passion, he loves it. And my 12-year-old loves it too. So I still, will go out onto the Nintendo Switch store and I'll buy them Minecraft, because I know that's something that they love, and it's something that the two of them do together without arguing with each other. So, but just learning what your kids love, and helping them to develop that passion without putting expectations on them because you don't understand it, or it doesn't mesh well with you and your personality, because your kids aren't you, and your kids are individuals, and you just need to just learn to love them for the individual that they are, and not expect them to be who you want them to be.
Thank you, Brandon, for hanging out with us. Yeah. This isn't an official podcast question, but for those who want to grab a hold of your podcast, The Brewed Life, how can our listeners find you?
Yeah, so it's out there on all the podcast platforms. It's audio only. I don't do anything cool like video yet, but it's, so whether it's Spotify, Apple, Pandora, whatever, like it's out there everywhere. But it's called The Brewed Life, and there's several seasons. I've been doing a couple episodes a week when I do seasons. So anyway, right now we're talking to people about how they overcame obstacles in their life. So go out there and find me. I'm also, the Brewed Life podcast is also on Facebook and Instagram. So you can find it out there on social media, and feel free to message me through there. And if you have any questions, or you feel like you want to be on the podcast, I'm always open to guests on the podcast. So
wonderful. Well, Brandon, we appreciate your time. We appreciate you carving out this part of the day to hang out with us on the Daddyhood Rocks podcast.
Sure.
And we wish you nothing but the best in navigating your own daddyhood journey, your life as a podcaster, being a husband, working in the world. So thank you. And we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care, Brandon. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Daddyhood Rocks podcast. What a great interview with Brandon Hall. What did you think of that one, John?
I gotta say, I don't have favorites, but I have favorites, and absolutely, he's towards the top of the list there. Like I said in the beginning, well-rounded, and we just get so much depth with this interview, and we learn a little bit about ourselves too.
For sure. Man, and I always think, you know how the phrase goes, time flies when you're having fun. And I've just been thinking about time. I mean, days seem to zip by here lately, especially in COVID Palooza, doing a lot of work for you, going to school, doing work, family stuff. So how are you doing? So you've been pretty busy lately, right?
Yeah. So this last week I had a massive test. I was stressed out about it. It's been kind of this, I told one of my professors, I'm like, I'm trying to figure out how to be a dad, be a husband, be a student, be a worker, all of this stuff that I have to do. I got to figure out how to balance it, and something's got to give and nothing can give. And so this week I was studying for a test, and, a lot of times you're with your kids and you think, oh my gosh, can they just go to bed already? Or, can you go take a nap? Can you please stop screaming in my ear? And I'm down here in my office most of this week studying, and I just realized how much I miss my kids. Like I got time with my boys Tuesday evening, but besides that, I was studying. And so, I realized as things kind of progress throughout the week, and then, I get through the test yesterday, and then I have more homework to do because I was studying for the test. And it's like, man, I miss my kids. And so now, I'm sitting here. I got time alone with my two babies, my twins, this afternoon, but my stepdaughters are off with their grandparents this weekend. It's not my weekend with my boys. And so I'm just like, man, I missed out on so much this week. And so it's just one of those things that, as things progress throughout your week and you start to think, okay, can you go to bed, please? Like, can you, no, I can't snuggle right now. Don't do that, because you're going to get busy eventually, and you're going to miss out on things, and you're going to realize that you're missing things, and it's just going to be even harder on you.
John, thank you for being an example and setting an example as far as being a busy guy, but also the right mindset as far as engaging and leveling up and having fun despite that. You have earned the award of the carrot. If you care at all, you'll take the time to spend with your children. You have won the Care It All award from Brandon Miller. Congratulations.
Man, I appreciate that. I'll have a speech later, but man, that's probably the tastiest award I've ever won. So
you're welcome. Now the mackerel, I'm sure, was pretty good, but
the mackerel, I'm sure, was good, but I mean, a carrot, that's one of the better veggies.
Mm-hmm. I'm rooting for you, so you know.
All
right.
He's got jokes, folks. Yeah. You really wanted to plant that one in my brain, didn't you?
Absolutely. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to the Daddyhood Rocks podcast. We love spending time with you. We love putting this thing together because we are huge fans of daddyhood. We feel like not that it's just a good thing, but it's imperative. It's vital that dads step up to the plate and become better dads. And so that's why we're here, not because we're better dads, but because we care about daddyhood enough to reach out and to give you tools to help you improve so we can also improve. We're on this journey with you. So whatever podcast platform you care to listen in on, whether it's Anchor or Apple or Google or Spotify, wherever it is, find us there, the Daddyhood Rocks podcast. Rate us, listen, subscribe. We're on YouTube. For now, it's under BK Miller. We're there. That's all that we put on that channel. And then also, of course, we're on Facebook and other social media, Instagram, Twitter. Follow us. We have lots to say. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day. This has been another episode of the Daddyhood Rocks podcast.